Just about a week or two ago, hundreds of birds were caught on camera unexplainably dropping from the sky. But before we get into this video, if you are loving Creep Time and you want additional creepy content, make sure that you check out my YouTube, my Twitter, and my Insta in the bio. I have tons of extra content on there. So this event actually took place in Chihuahua, Mexico, which, yes, happens to be the home of the legend of La Pascualita. But the circumstances surrounding the fall from the sky were difficult for even experts to explain. So the running theory from several sources suggested that they had entered some sort of pollution cloud or an electrical force that sent the entire flock to the ground. But ecologists believe that they may have actually been attacked mid-flight by an unknown aerial predator. It would have been something that could have caused them to lose stability or collide with each other before plummeting. But we're unclear as to what that predator could be, as this is not a common occurrence. So what do you think really caused this? I get chills like every single time that I tell this story. Okay, so this is Eric Lewis. He was a highly experienced mountain climber who ends up going missing on Mount Rainier. But the story behind this is creepy as hell. So he embarks on this climb with two other climbers who were all attached by a rope, with him being in the back of the group. But at some point on this climb, when the climber who was in front of him went to go pull on the rope so they could, tug him in, they realized that the rope had gone completely slack. And when they do pull in the rope, they see that the rope was actually cut clean, which would indicate that Eric had actually cut himself off the rope and away from the group for an unknown reason. And once they knew he was gone, they alert, rangers, and a search party goes up there for 3 days, but they never found him. They only found his backpack and no footprints. Whatever caused him to cut himself off that rope and separate from the group remains an unknown, as he has never been found. Growing up watching Courage the Cowardly Dog, did you know that it was based off of a real place called Middle of Nowhere, New Mexico? The concept was inspired by this rural location where feasibly there are very few people still left, but it did fixate on an elderly couple that did go missing after they started to report strange sightings. Although never proven, it's believed that their disappearance, as well as countless others, was at the hands of David Parker Ray, who was a notorious assailant who lived just 7 miles away from here. The couple was never found, but their dog was left behind, which bore the concept of Courage the Cowardly Dog and his elderly caretakers. This is one of the worst cases of Munchausen's I have ever heard of. There is allegedly a woman who picked at her legs all the way through to the bone. I'm cautioning an extreme warning for this one. We know about Munchausen's by proxy, but Munchausen's can be applicable to oneself if you are intentionally perpetuating your own injury or illness to remain unwell. A former ballerina presented with horrific sores on her legs on social media, claiming to have a rare illness. But her followers on social media chimed in when they noted that these wounds looked self-inflicted, but nonetheless, she continued to pick through skin, through muscle, through nerves, and eventually down to her bone. But by the time the infection became emergent, doctors could not save her legs, as she had intentionally destroyed them. She had ensured that they would both become infected. She now lives as a double amputee and insists that this was a mysterious illness out of her control. Munchausen's is a mental health crisis, but there are resources for help and there are roads to recovery. Thank you to everybody who requested repeatedly that I cover the case of Lizzie Borden. After reading about it, I now understand why. Lizzie Borden was a young woman who was living out with her family in Massachusetts in the 1800s. Her mother had actually died, so she was living with her father and stepmother, and tensions ran extremely high in that house. But what made this case famous was August 4th, 1892, when sometime that morning, Lizzie's father and stepmother were brutally ended, her father being on this couch. Her stepmother received 40 strikes to the skull using a hatchet axe, and her father 41. Lizzie is arrested, and there are a ton of counterclaims of people saying they heard her laughing at the time this happened, other people in the house who said they didn't hear a thing. But she was eventually found not guilty by a jury of 12 men due to the fact that there was no physical evidence that could link her to these crimes. She was given her freedom, and the Borden house still remains to this day as a horrifying staple of Fall Rivers, Massachusetts. 3 scary movies that were based on real stories, and the third one is absolutely insane. Scream just made yet another resurgence of the franchise as kind of the campy classic in the horror genre. But this whole franchise actually has some truth behind the original concept, as it was inspired by the Gainesville Ripper of Florida, who took the lives of 5 students seemingly for no motive other than just to gamify the killings. He even posed the bodies so that when others found them, it was horrifying. Child's Play is a movie that I would have never imagined to have had some truth behind it. But the original concept that inspired the script was actually based on Robert the Doll, which was gifted to a child in the early 1900s by a woman who practiced voodoo, and people people claimed this doll could walk and talk on its own. Open water is a nightmare concept of a couple that gets left behind on a boating tour in shark-infested waters. But this exact scenario did happen to a real-life couple who were also left in shark-infested waters. Kaylin Lauder was a 30-year-old social worker who was living out in Utah in 2014. She ends up hitting a rough patch after being laid off from her job, but was regularly looking for work until her behavior suddenly shifted. Without any history of mental illness or abusing 911, she ends up making a series of emergency calls where she's claiming that there are people outside of her condo at her door. But when police arrived, there's nobody there. Even stranger, the following morning, she's captured on the security camera outside of her condo where she's standing in the rain, crying, talking to someone who's not there. She then runs from the parking lot barefoot for an unknown reason, and this was the last time she was ever caught on camera. Months later, her body was discovered hidden under a bridge 5 miles away from her last known whereabouts, but here's the eerie part. A medical examination could not determine what happened to her. She had no injuries to the body and no substances that could explain the behavior. And during that 5-mile journey, not a single person claimed to see her. This conspiracy has always freaked me out. Allegedly, when Avril Lavigne debuted in 2002, she found the fame incredibly difficult to handle, so her label employed a look-alike. An actress named Melissa Vandella, who was typically used for paparazzi diversions as well as red carpet events. But it was reported that around this time, Avril Lavigne ended things due to severe depression, but a record label, having already invested millions of dollars, still did own the commercial name Avril Lavigne. The theory being that Melissa Vandella was then trained and employed to step into her place full time and just assumed this role of Avril. But the reason people believe this theory is that they've mostly spotted the key differences in just how much Avril has changed between 03 and 04. Physically, yes, but even her handwriting seemed to change, and the most perplexing being her speaking voice.
I want to be singing someone else's lyrics. I want to be singing mine and what came from my heart and my opinions and how I believe and how I think.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here for the grand opening of Koi. It's my favorite restaurant. It's my favorite sushi restaurant in the world.
But what freaks me out the most about this is that if you look up articles about this conspiracy when it first broke like 5 years ago, most of the videos and pictures supporting the story have actually since been deleted. So if there's no truth to it, why? In 2010, 20-year-old Amber Tuckero decided she wanted to go into the city to do some solo exploring on a night out. So she hitchhiked a ride with an unknown man who said he would take her into the city of Edmonton, but Amber would never make it. While on the drive, she suddenly realized that something was very wrong when he started driving through back roads. She had no cell service but managed to record this audio on her phone. It is the only evidence we have of some of her final moments.
We're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not. Then where are these roads going to? 50th Street. 50th Street. Are you sure? Absolutely. No, where are we going? 50th Street. 50th Street. 50th Street. East, right? East. Over,
Exactly how old would you guess this woman is? For those who are unfamiliar, the Death House landlady went down in Sacramento's history as one of the most unusual serial killers the county had ever seen. Her name was Dorothea Puente. She was a woman with a traumatic childhood who exhibited tendencies of a pathological liar. Around the 70s, she reinvents herself as this sort of older Christian woman who would run a boarding house where she takes care of the elderly. But Dorothea was only in her 50s and was intentionally making herself look older to upkeep this image as the harmless caregiver. But when police came knocking to investigate a tenant who had gone missing, they noticed that her garden had all fresh soil. Upon inspecting a little further, they uncovered the remains of 8 rotting bodies. These were tenants that Dorothea had given sleeping pills to and buried, and then still collected their government benefits, making her one of the most sly killers in Sacramento's history. The unsolved final footage of Lars Mittank is just as chilling as it is confusing. But the story really starts back in 2014. This is 28-year-old Lars, and he ends up taking a trip to Bulgaria with his friends. So at a night out at a bar, he ends up getting into an argument with several unknown men, which results in a fight, and he ends up rupturing his eardrum. Because of his injury, he insists that his friends are going to fly back without him and he's just going to stay behind and recover for a few days. But as soon as he's left behind in the hotel, this is when the strange and erratic behavior becomes almost immediate, and he starts becoming paranoid and thinks there are men following him. Which then leads us to this final footage where we see Lars arriving at the airport, presuming that he's there to catch a flight because he has luggage in hand, but then for an unknown reason we see him sprinting out of the terminal into the parking lot, and this was the last time he has ever been seen on camera. To this day, what Lars thought he was running from or where he went remains a complete unknown in this case. The mystery of Kate Yup is still very much unexplained. Kate Yup was a YouTuber who would make mukbang videos where she would eat excessive amounts of food. These were not normal videos. Kate was eating aggressively fast, almost like she was being starved or she was forced. She also wears a blindfold in every video, so her identity is completely unknown. But viewers became seriously concerned when they started to notice warning signs that Kate might be under someone's control. There are indicators that there was somebody else in that room with her while she's eating all of this food. You can hear him breathing in the background of her videos. She's eating so fast that in one video she actually chips her teeth, and when she shows them to the camera, these are teeth that are rotted. But the most compelling evidence to support that Kate Yup could be a victim of trafficking are the cryptic messages that she's left in the text editing of her videos. Since this all kind of blew up in the media, the channel has gone totally dark and there hasn't been a new video in years. Videos like these that claim to capture urban legends on camera just freak me out so bad. The story behind this is the legend of Tatat Duende, which is a mythical creature most commonly found in Mayan folklore. But the generational stories of these things just take on like a whole new meaning of creepy when people start claiming to capture them on film. 3 of the scariest bridges in America and why you should avoid them at all costs. The Captain William Moore Bridge is a semi-traditional suspension bridge located in a scenic gorge in Alaska. But what makes this bridge terrifying is that it was built on an active earthquake fault. So to keep the bridge from falling apart in the event of an earthquake, only one side of it is balanced and fully secured, meaning the bridge can rock in either direction. The Royal Gorge Bridge is definitely a scenic Colorado view for anyone who can handle its height. What freaks people out about this bridge is that the guardrails do get pretty short at certain parts, meaning the 1,000-foot drop is something you may not want to look down during your stroll. The Deception Pass Bridge is really not too bad of a drive at face value if you ever find yourself in the Washington area. But what makes this bridge unusually strange are the increasingly high numbers of accidents and unalivings that take place here. So much so that unalivings have jumped to 15 per year and no one knows why. This is a 1940s ventriloquist doll. It's from the World War II era and it was captured on camera moving on its own. So the story behind this is that the doll is actually owned by a collector named Michael Diamond. He's a Liverpool man and a father of 2. But he noticed that the latch on the glass case kept opening night after night, so what he did was he set up a camera assuming that he was going to catch one of his children doing it, and this was the footage he captured. Welcome to Creep Time with Silas Steen. This is the disturbing story of the model who ate her husband. So this is Omaima Ari. She was a 23-year-old Egyptian model who was living in Los Angeles in kind of the late 80s to the early 90s. By 1991, she marries 56-year-old Bill Nelson, who's a pilot in Los Angeles, and the abuse of this marriage starts almost instantly. She was subjected to physical abuse, she was repeatedly SA'd in her own home, and that is until one November night when she completely snaps and she ends up beating and stabbing Bill to death. She then starts to dismember the body and she starts to cook and boil it piece by piece, even going as far as to barbecue his ribs and reportedly eat them. She would later go on to receive a full life sentence and is deemed insane by the courts, where she appeals her parole repeatedly, but the judges believe that she is an indefinite threat to society. 3 of the most dangerous roads in America and why you should avoid them at all costs. Number 1. One of the most treacherous and terrifying roads sits on top of a Colorado mountain with a drop so steep you'd rather not look down it while driving. The road has no guardrails and very tight turns, meaning one wrong move could be your last. Number 2. This one is known as the Overseas Highway. It stretches from Miami all the way to Key West and goes for a full 545 miles. The prolonged ride over nothing but the ocean has proven to be both dangerous and anxiety-inducing, with an average of 108 people who die on this route every single year. Number 3. Although it kind of looks scenic at first, the back road of Highway 17 is filled with sharp blind spots and no light past sundown. But the real danger of this route that poses a fatal risk is actually the wildlife, as the mountain lions are known to jump directly from trees onto your car. 3 urban legends that turned out to be true. Number 1. In the 1980s, parents in Long Island terrified their children with the legend of Cropsey. He was a murderous man who lived beneath an abandoned school and would capture children. But it was later found that the old janitor of the school was still living on school grounds, and it's believed he was responsible for the disappearance of several kids, which made the legend of Cropsey true. Number 2. Charlie No Face was the terrifying legend of a featureless man who would roam the streets of Pittsburgh at night. But it was discovered that this man did exist. His name was Raymond Robinson. He was a very nice guy, and he only left his house at night as he feared his deformity would scare people. Number 3. Legend has it that an escaped asylum patient roams near the Fairfax County Bridge, where countless amounts of dead rabbits have been found. There wasn't any legitimacy to this legend until a couple drove through this bridge in the 1970s, only to find a man dressed as a bunny who threw an axe through their windshield before they got away. So a couple of days ago on Live, somebody asked me if I've had any paranormal experiences, and I actually told a story that wasn't from me, it was from my brother while we were at my grandma's. This is a picture of her foyer. Just to give some familial context here, of me and my other siblings, my brother is the least theatrical, I guess. He doesn't tell stories, he doesn't embellish, he doesn't do stuff like this, which is why I fully believe this. So anyway, we're at my grandma's one night, I'm in the kitchen, he's in the TV room, and if you look to the left when you're in the TV room, this is exactly what you see. You see the foyer leading to the front door, and you see on the right the archway leading to the living room. Suddenly, he starts screaming and panicking, and he is yelling that there is an old man in the house who is in the living room. So what he said he saw was an old man dressed in white with long white hair peering from around this archway right here. But we flipped the house upside down. We never found anything. And to this day, my brother doesn't like to talk about this. So, in 1963, President JFK was assassinated, which gave way to a host of conspiracy theories, most of which we already know. But one of the only ones with camera footage that can verify its subject is the story of this woman, known as the Babushka Lady. Arguably, she was one of the closest spectators to actually see the assassination and was even seen snapping pictures at the exact moment that JFK was hit. So naturally, the FBI wanted her eyewitness account, and they wanted that up-close camera footage, but she was never found, and no one seems to know who this woman was. There was a woman named Beverly Oliver who came forward who claimed that this was her, but she would have been 17 at the time, which doesn't really match up with the photos, and it's believed that she probably fabricated this story for 15 minutes of fame. But who the real Babushka Lady was remains an unknown, and why she's never come forward with the footage she captured has never been determined. Try to imagine a scenario where you're jumping out of a plane through the middle of the night in the rain. The mysterious case of D.B. Cooper is what put this exact scenario on the map. On November 24th, 1971, a plane was hijacked by a mysterious unknown man going by Dan Cooper, otherwise known as D.B. Cooper. So while carrying a bomb on this plane, he demands that they land the plane, the FBI provides him $200,000 cash, 4 parachutes, and they refuel the plane. So of course, because he has hostages, they comply. So they provide him the money, the plane is refueled, and they are back in the air on the way to Mexico City per his instructions. But at some point after they take off, unannounced, D.B. Cooper grabs the parachute, grabs the money, and jumps out of the plane into the night sky, and he was never seen again. But most paratroopers weighed in on this and don't believe anyone could have survived this jump in these conditions. That being said, his body was never found, nor was the bulk of that money. I genuinely do not even care if this video does well. Can someone please just explain to me what these things are, if you can tag a scientist, or if you are a scientist, can you please weigh in here and just explain this to me? So if you look at these videos of them, they're just these long-legged white creatures. They're only captured at night on like garage camera footage, but they don't have extremities like a head or arms. But what freaks me out is that they're so consistent. All of these videos that come out of these, they all look the same. They're from different locations, but they're all kind of in the California area. Like, what is that? What is that? Okay, like, keep your eyes over to the right-hand side of this video. Look in the dark corner. Look at that. Like, what? There's no way that that's... Look at it again, magnified. Do you see that? Who's faking that? What? The only contextual tie-in that I found are these Native American carvings that do kind of show creatures that look like these, but these sculptures don't really have a lot of historical context to them, so I'm begging you for rational explanations here. Please, somebody weigh in. Tell me what these things are. On February 19th of 2013, guests of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles were complaining of poor-tasting tap water that was running brown. But when the hotel staff went to the roof to check the water tanks, what they found was horrific. Floating inside the tank were the 2-week-old remains of 21-year-old Elisa Lam. But here's why her death became kind of infamously mysterious. Elisa had been missing for weeks prior, which correlated with this strange and unusual video footage from the hotel elevator, which is believed to be her last known sighting. While inside the elevator, she's seen hiding, then pressing all of the buttons, and then she appears to be speaking to someone who's not there. But even more mysterious is how she even got on the roof in the first place. The roof access point is actually set with an alarm that only hotel staff can get past and disarm using a key card. Her autopsy showed nothing in her system aside from prescription medications, and what's strange is that when search canines were on the roof just days prior looking for her, they had never picked up her scent. The body was also found completely undressed in the water, and her cell phone has never been found. There has never been any evidence of foul play or that she was SA'd, and her death was eventually ruled as accidental due to a psychotic break, but the odd nature of how all of this unfolded has left a lot of unanswered questions for this case. Do you know why the safety seal exists on most medications? The story behind this is a lot darker than you might imagine. So in 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman died at home under mysterious circumstances. That exact same day, 27-year-old Adam Janis died as well, and then his brother, and then his sister-in-law. Over the course of several days, there were 7 people in total who all died under these mysterious circumstances. That is until investigators found the common link: over-the-counter bottles of Tylenol. It was found that an unknown number of these bottles had all been opened within their stores and were laced with cyanide. All medications were pulled from shelves across the entire country. The manufacturer loses hundreds of millions of dollars on this. But the culprit for this was never actually caught, and it's unknown how many bottles across the US were tampered with that potentially could have caused a mass national casualty. Since 1982, safety seals have become a staple on all over-the-counter medications in the US. Telling the stories of TikTokers as if they're true crime cases. This is the story of Max Taylor. Max first rose to fame on TikTok in his early 20s just about 2 years ago. He was known for his comedy-driven TikToks and a very specific curvature to his body. But behind all of this, there was a dark secret that Max was keeping. Behind closed doors, Max was deepening a fixation on Hollywood actor Ryan Reynolds. Early clues and indications in his videos gave us a bit of a window into the mind of Max and how this obsession would quickly turn sinister. But this all changed in early 2022. Reportedly one evening, Ryan Reynolds is recorded phoning into law enforcement from an undisclosed location where he says he's being held. What Ryan failed to mention to police was that he was being held in some seriously swole arms. The investigation is currently ongoing, telling the stories of TikTokers as if they're true crime cases. This is the tale of Brittany Broski. Brittany was a young woman living out in Texas in 2019 when she created a video that changed everything. This was not a normal video. In the video, she can be seen drinking kombucha with an array of reactions and faces of disgust. Following the fame of the video on Stan Twitter, Brittany was subsequently fired from her job, leading her out to California with an accomplice named Sarah Shower. It was around this time that they both crossed paths with a woman named Tracy Martell. Tracy had taped numerous videos with Brittany as the subject where she can be seen repeatedly scalping her on camera. It's believed Brittany survived the ordeal, although no one knows of her current whereabouts. whereabouts. She's most recently been spotted in a series of videos that seem to be confined to one room, although police have no way of knowing if this is a bunker or if she's being held here. And Tracy Martel has never been caught. A woman who was found frozen completely solid lived to talk about it. Her name was Jean Hillard, and while driving in a blizzard, she lost control of her car and ended up on the side of the road. But because she was semi-close to where her friend lived, she thought she could just get out and walk it. It was negative 30 degrees outside. But the wild part is that she did make it to her friends, but not even 15 feet from the house, she collapsed in the driveway and remained there for 6 hours until she was completely frozen. By the time she was found and rushed to the ER, her skin was completely solid. They couldn't even open her mouth, and they tried to put an IV in her, and the needle snapped. But after hours of slowly heating the body using water packs, she makes a miraculous recovery and surprisingly didn't suffer any brain damage. Within 6 hours, she returned to talking and remains as one of the only cases of someone who returned from a state of being fully frozen. Did you know there was once the invention of a car that ran completely on water? But the story of what happened to the inventor is a little more mysterious. Try to imagine this. Stanley Meyer had invented a vehicle that supposedly ran only on water. Not only that, but with just 22 gallons of water, it was capable of getting all the way from New York to Los Angeles. But as soon as the press picked up the story, he was immediately hit with intimidation and allegedly oil companies attempting to buy out the design and destroy it. He refused, and while on an investors' dinner in the late 90s, he unexpectedly collapsed, which has been the subject of serious suspicion, as many people believe there may have been poison involved. Just a week after his demise, his lab was apparently raided and all of his research, including the test model, were stolen. It does beg the question, what could today have looked like with a country fully powered by water-operated vehicles? Tell me of an unsolved case that is eerier than this. Dylan Parker was a college student who was headed to a party in a rural part of Idaho on a winter night. He had been texting his mom all night, and there was a plan that she was going to come pick him up at a gas station he would have to walk a mile to because this place was pretty far in the woods. But he never showed. Of course, she reports this to the police, and after a week of searching, his body is found by accident in the woods in the complete opposite direction of where he was supposed to be walking. Here's the unsettling part. So Dylan was found with a ton of scratches on his body, like he had been through some really rough wooded areas, but he was wearing no pants and had no shoes, but his socks and his feet were completely clean. Even stranger, no footprints in the snow. We have no idea how he got there. His remaining clothing has never been found, and an examination determined he ended from hypothermia. At the time, the deputy coroner spoke out, and he insisted that despite there being no footprints, the scratches on his body were consistent with someone who was carried through the woods. We are looking at the creepiest graves in the world. For most of us, graves keep people buried below ground and we don't have access. But imagine a grave with a custom set of stairs that could take you to a window to see your loved one. Distraught over losing her daughter in the 1800s, a woman had a custom staircase built so she could travel below ground and look at her whenever she wanted. And because her daughter was scared of thunderstorms, the mother could always be seen at the grave anytime it was raining. We've all heard of the post-mortem mask, where one immortalizes the face of the person who has passed by getting one final imprint of the body. This tombstone is the resting place of the 3 daughters of Isaac Nettles. Although we don't know what led to their demise, it's believed that he imprinted their faces in sand, filled it with concrete, and then constructed this stone. In the 1800s, a boy passed of an incurable illness, but before he did, he told his father he was scared to be buried because of the darkness. So to honor his wishes, his father built a tomb with a tiny window to always make sure there was light. I will never fully understand the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. So Brandon had just finished up his freshman year of college out in Minnesota, and he attends a party on the evening of May 14th, 2008. He's reported to have left the party sometime around midnight and heads to his family home, which is about 30 miles away, and for an unknown reason, he takes a back road. But at some point on his drive, his car ends up in a ditch, so he calls his parents to come pick him up, but he has to give them very specific instructions because, again, he's on a back road. But by the time they get there, they can't find him anywhere, so he gets back on the phone with them, and he says he thinks he can see their car lights in the distance, so he's gonna get out, he's gonna walk to them. He stays on this call for 40 minutes just walking through the dark towards this light, and then unexpectedly interrupts himself and just yells, "Oh shit." These were the last words his parents had ever heard from him. It's believed Brandon was actually 25 miles away, and despite search efforts, he has never been found, and no one knows what it is that he saw. There has been a home fragrance spray sold at Walmart that has been linked to several people falling ill, 2 of which who did not make it. Roughly a year ago, a string of mysterious illnesses plagued patients across the US that prompted a multi-state investigation, which has now tied it back to this home aromatherapy spray. It was found that a rare and dangerous bacteria had contaminated these products, resulting in a series of severe symptoms including fevers, loss of appetite, nausea. And for several of these patients, symptoms went well beyond that. Patients who suddenly could not walk, they could not speak, and 2 of which who have passed. The retailer has issued a full recall on all of these products sold in stores, and they are cautioning anyone who may have these in your home, discard them with the bottle intact and outside of the house. But what's terrifying about this is that despite a rigorous set of operations for quality control to prevent this, it somehow slipped and ended up in a very everyday product. A product that we may have sitting in our kitchen or our bathroom. This is the eerie story of the medical student who went missing and has never been found. This is Brian Schaefer. He was a 27-year-old med student studying in Columbus, Ohio in 2006. On the night of March 31st, spring break had just started, so he ends up going out to a bar with some friends in Columbus, but would never make it back. So his friends had just assumed that maybe he left with somebody or he just went back on his own, but security camera footage told an almost unexplainable story here. Just after 2 a.m., Brian is caught on security camera talking to 2 unknown women and then is seen re-entering the bar, but never comes back out. There are no other public entrances or exits to this bar, so we don't know what happened to him after this. He was reported missing within days, and of course the bar fell under suspicion because how do we explain this? But they were eventually cleared, as were his friends, although one of his friends refused to take a lie detector test concerning any questions about his disappearance. To this day, we have no idea what really happened to him. A Florida woman has been found after wandering through the sewer system for weeks. So this all started when 43-year-old Lindsay Kennedy had wandered off in a state of paranoia and psychosis. When she suddenly thought law enforcement was approaching her, she became irrational and hid in the drain system but could not get out. But her family tracked her phone by using an emergency ping that led them to this drain entrance, and they knew this was it. She had to be in the sewer system somewhere. So what they did was they went to every sewer opening within a radius and they dropped down food and water in hopes that she would survive. After 20 days of her wandering through the sewer system in the dark, she has finally been found and is apparently in stable condition. This is one of the eeriest YouTube channels you are ever gonna see. In what first caught the media's attention years ago, it appears to be just an average guy who turns on the camera, sits, and smiles in silence for hours. And he has hundreds of these videos. His face begins to twitch, his eyes wander, and he's even been seen crying in these videos. But the question everyone wanted to know is, why? And who is he? It was later revealed that this is an ongoing performance art piece, but the level of commitment to this silent smiling routine is unnerving. So committed that in one video, he captures an unknown man entering his apartment, and he doesn't even move. He just continues right on. He just stares right into the camera and keeps smiling. Could you imagine walking in on this? Mysterious brain disease is spreading throughout Canada. In the province of New Brunswick, there have been 48 new cases of an unknown neurological disease that have now been linked. Symptoms are presenting in patients between the ages of 18 to 85 and are starting off mild with just general anxiety, mood swings, followed by muscle spasms and body aches. As the disease advances, people are experiencing mobility issues, language impairments, followed by hallucinations and transient delusions. These are known as Capgras delusions, where one believes their friends and family are not who they say they are and they are imposters. Although neurologists have no diagnosis for the disease, the running theory is that an unknown foreign toxin may be behind it. Make sure to stay tuned for more updates on this.